So the other day I was working on a side project that required a form, and forms are pretty simple. You have some input boxes, you have some check boxes, and you have a submit button. Implemented that in a couple minutes, and when I started testing it, I noticed something really interesting. The information I was putting inside my input boxes were being converted into query params, appended to a URL, and then being requested automatically, all from the form. I thought this was pretty cool. Kind of simplifies the process of defining an API or expected functionality, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted for my full stack application. So I started to do some digging because I didn't want my submit button to automatically refresh the page by requesting a different route than expected. So after some light research, I came across Prevent Default, and I thought it would be really interesting to share with you all what Prevent Default actually does and why you should be using it, where you should be using it, just some basic information about the function. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more informational videos. Alright, let's get started. So quick definition lesson, what is Prevent Default? Well, according to the MDN documentation, Prevent Default is a native method that's found inside the event interface or the event object that tells the user agent to prevent the default action that's associated with the event that's submitted. So for the example of the form that I was working with, the click function of the submit button that I defined, the default action for that element was to take the information from my input boxes, turn those into params, and then send a request to a specific URL. But for me, that wasn't what I wanted. So Prevent Default gives me a great solution to a problem of not having control of default actions of elements. So I can show you a little example of my form. Cool. Now I have these input boxes with some form validation. See here, you can't actually submit that because it's not formatted like an email, which is really nice. And you can also see that the password input also has little bulleted characters to secure someone's password. So let's just type in some basic information and see what happens. So we do testing at testing.com and a basic password, and we submit it. So our page refreshed, but let's look at the request that was made. So looking at the Chrome DevTools on the network tab, you can see that there is a request, the name, email testing, and the password equals testing. So this information, as I said before, is taken from the input boxes and then converted into query params and appended to the URL that I'm currently at, which is yrv7f.csp.app. And this is a really great, convenient functionality, but I probably want to implement my own expected functionality. So this is where Prevent Default comes in handy, where instead of calling default action, Prevent Default gives me the ability to negate that action and implement my own function. So we can see Prevent Default in basic action by adding an event listener. So I'll add the onClick event listener function, and it'll take in handle click. Sweet. And then I'll come in here, do handle click. I'll bind it with an arrow function. And here, I have to make sure that I take in the E parameter for event, and I do E prevent default. Again, if we do testing at testing.com and testing the password, and we submit, you notice that the page doesn't refresh, and I'm looking at the network tab, and I don't see any new requests here. It's the old one that we were looking at before. Prevent Default stops the expected default functionality of the event, so this gives us the ability to then define whatever we want to do. We can make our own unique network requests, we can make something pop up on the page, we can literally do anything that we wanted to do without the form submitting. So let's look at a couple of other examples to help you understand how you can use Prevent Default. Another really popular example would have to be checkboxes. If you spend enough time on the internet, you'll probably notice that some websites have better looking checkboxes than others. And this is mainly due to the fact that design and styling has been prioritized on these websites compared to other websites. The way that you can get custom checkboxes to look so nice is by doing a little extra magic on the JavaScript side. Here I have a really simple setup for a checkbox. I have a label that says click here, and I have an input that has a type of checkbox, so it's rendered as a checkbox. The expected functionality, or the default functionality for a checkbox, is to highlight the background with a blue color and a white check mark when selected, and then erase all those stylings when it's deselected. But let's say that I don't want that to happen. Maybe I want to do something that's a little extra, a little fancy, who knows? So what I'll do here is I'll add another event listener, because every single time I click on the checkbox, an event is emitted. So I want to listen for one of those events, which is the clicking event. So what I'm going to do first is prevent the default event. Then I'm going to get the div container object that holds the label and the input elements. Then I create paragraph tags that have the text inserted cannot select this checkbox, and then I append it to the end of the container element. So if I go back to the checkbox and I try to click on it, I'll notice that instead of it actually being highlighted or selected with the blue background and a white check mark, instead I'm getting these messages cannot select this checkbox, and they're just going to continuously be appended to the container. This provides a lot of freedom and creativity to developers to make really great web experiences, websites, or even games that are hosted or developed for the browser. I'll give you one last example, and that example will be links. This is a really simple link that navigates over to my Twitter page on a new tab. So if we click on it, we'll open up a new tab and you can see, this is my Twitter page. You should definitely go follow me. Let's say that I didn't want new tabs to open, or I didn't even want to navigate to a link in general. So what I could do is I can add another event listener on click, and then pass in an event handler. So handle link. I have the function handle link, which will prevent the default event, which I'll use to prevent the default event. Awesome. So now if I try to click on the link to my Twitter page, nothing will happen. We're preventing the default functionality, which is navigating over to the link. I've been showing a lot of examples with clicking events, but it's really important to know that a lot of events are being emitted constantly. If you listen to every single possible event that's happening in your browser at a given time, you'll see hundreds per second. One last important thing to note, not all events are cancelable or preventable. So one of those events that don't allow their default action to be prevented is scrolling. So I increased the height of our container element to 135 viewpoints for the height, and if I try to scroll, I'll get a little window alert saying that I'm scrolling. If I try to prevent the default, nothing will happen. We'll still be able to scroll. As you can see, I can still scroll on the page. If you want to know if an event is actually cancelable, there is a boolean that also lives within the event object called cancelable, which is read-only, that tells you whether that event that's been emitted can be canceled or basically have the prevent default function called on it. So if we try to scroll and see what happens, we'll see that the cancelable status of the event that's emitted from scrolling is set to false. So we get that first an error message. So right here, so we can see that the scroll event cannot be canceled. The state is false. So that's it for this video for Prevent Default. If you learned anything new, give this video a thumbs up. If there's anything you want me to cover in the future, leave those comments down in the comment sections below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.